Once upon a time, I had a job that I really liked, and it helped my family a lot. But there was a time when things got tough. It was during a time called the Great Recession, and a lot of people had a hard time finding work. I used to teach people how to work on the phones at a call center. It was a 3-week course for each group, and then a new class would start. But then, the company decided they didn't want to keep full-time teachers like me. They thought we cost too much money. Instead, they asked regular workers from the call center to do the training in the summer and fall. These workers got paid less than us, and they didn't even get a bonus for doing the training. I was let go from my job, and even though I got some money for a few months, it wasn't enough. I had kids to take care of, and finding a new job was really hard. Nobody seemed to be hiring because a lot of companies were letting people go instead of hiring them. It was a tough time for me and many others. Once, when I was in the parking lot of a grocery store, a person I kinda knew came up to me. She was the sort of person who talks a lot and doesn't let you escape a conversation easily. Plus, she was a bit strange and involved in some not-so-good things. I knew she sold drugs sometimes because she offered them to me before, but I always said no. After I declined, she stopped bringing it up. She asked if I had found a new job. I told her I hadn't, and it was getting tough since the money I got after losing my old job was running out. I didn't know what I'd do if I didn't find a job soon and my savings were gone. Then, she surprised me by saying she might help me find a job. I was unsure because of her past, and I insisted I didn't want to do anything illegal. She promised it wasn't like that. She gave me a piece of paper with a phone number on it and said to call and mention she referred me. Then, for the first time ever, she left before I did. It felt strange, and I didn't really trust her. But after thinking, I decided it wouldn't hurt to try the number and see what happened. So, I called, and someone picked up quickly. They told me the name of a company I'd never heard of and asked how they could help. I gave them the info my friend told me, and they said they could set up an interview the next day. They gave me an address and hung up. I was pretty excited because it seemed real, and I didn't expect that. I could go to the interview right after dropping my kids off at school. So, I didn't have a GPS to help me, and I had to find the place on my own. I drove, and when I was getting closer, I saw that this was in a not-so-nice part of town. It was an area with a lot of big buildings that had closed down, and there were no cars around. I kept checking the addresses to find the right one. Finally, I found it because I remembered the company's name. But it was weird because there were no cars in the parking lot. I thought maybe the employees parked in the back, and I didn't worry too much since the business could still be running even if others around were closed. I parked in a spot marked for guests and got out of the car. As I walked up to the building, I started to feel very nervous. It didn't look like anyone was inside, and it was kind of scary walking up to it. I opened the door, and it was unlocked. At first, I felt relieved, thinking I had been sent to the wrong place. I went inside, but my relief didn't last. There was no one at the reception desk, no lights on, and the place was empty. I walked over to the elevator and pushed the button. I wondered if the reception area was closed, but maybe the place I was supposed to work at was open. However, there was no power, and the elevator didn't work at all. I stood there for a moment, not sure what to do. That's when I heard a strange voice saying something, but I couldn't understand it well. It seemed to be coming from the stairs by the elevators. Curious, I decided to open the door and listen. As soon as I opened the door, I regretted it. A loud and scary voice was chanting, "It's for you, Lord. Come to me, Lord." The sound echoed from downstairs in the basement of the building. I got scared for a moment, but then I quietly closed the door. Whatever was happening in that basement had nothing to do with the job interview. I planned to leave the building quietly, but fear took over, and I ran out, jumping into my car. While driving away, I saw several people in front of the building, but they weren't dressed like regular business folks. They were wearing weird ceremonial robes or something. They just stared as I sped away from that creepy scene. When I got home, I tried calling my friend who suggested I go there. She didn't answer, and she didn't return my message. I never talked to her or saw her again. I still don't know what really happened that day, and I hope I never find out. I like to stay fit and work out a lot. I even know some wrestling and martial arts, though I don't really like fighting. This is important to my story because it makes it scarier. This happened in the fall when the sun was setting earlier. I enjoy jogging, especially right before the sun sets, so I can watch the beautiful fall sunset. One day, while jogging, I decided to cut through a park. It was a big area with a path through the forest. When you came out of the forest, there was a big field with a playground in the middle. As I jogged past the playground and stopped to enjoy the sunset, I noticed a kid playing there. They looked pretty young, and it seemed odd that they were out so late. Just as I was about to start jogging again, I saw something else. There was a strange-looking man standing outside the playground. He moved a bit and leaned against the swing set. I don't know why I kept watching, but there was something about the guy that made me feel uneasy. His back was facing me, so I wasn't sure if he saw me. But since he wasn't there when I first arrived, I doubted he was the child's parent. The man walked up to the kid, and they started talking. I noticed the kid backing away and looking scared. I got a little worried but didn't do anything just yet. Then, the kid stood up and started moving away from the man. I thought I should go check and see what was wrong. So, I began jogging up to the playground. After a moment, the man grabbed the kid's arm. The kid tried to struggle and move away, but the man had a strong grip. That's when the kid started yelling, and I realized this person was either a mean parent or someone trying to take the child away. Either way, I knew I had to do something quickly. I ran up to the guy and grabbed the arm holding the kid. I pulled his arm away, and the kid got loose and fell to the ground. I turned the guy around to face me. He was a scary-looking man, thin, pale, with greasy and nasty-looking hair. The scariest part was his eyes, which looked totally crazy. Even though he was much smaller than me, the man jumped on me and tried to knock me over. I was surprised because I was much bigger, but he managed to tackle me to the ground. He was unusually strong, and it was one of the toughest fights I've ever had. He kept yelling something about needing blood. Finally, I managed to control the man by putting him on his stomach and holding his arms behind his back with my left hand and knee. I threw my cell phone over to the kid and told him to call 911. He didn't waste any time and made the call. I kept the struggling man down until the police arrived. They took over and arrested him. But that's not the end of the story. I was there when the kid talked to the cops, and his story was really scary. The kid told the police that the man came up to him, asking to play a game. The kid felt uncomfortable right away. He didn't want to play with a stranger, especially someone as strange as this guy. When the kid moved away, the man grabbed him and started growling, saying he kept seeing scary things. He told the kid he needed to drain his blood to take care of the visions. The guy was on serious drugs and had mental problems. He had schizophrenia, and the drugs made it worse. He was on PCP, which was my first time being around someone on it. That explained why he put up a good fight with me. It scared me to think about what could have happened if he had won. Luckily, the kid was okay. He wasn't too scared about the whole thing, and that's the most important part. I'm not totally sure if these two things are connected, but they might be. A long time ago, when I was in my 20s, I had a really messy breakup with a girl. It was like one of those fights you see in movies, lots of yelling, screaming, calling names, and throwing things. It ended with both of us shouting as she left the house. I stood at the door, still yelling as she walked to her car and supposedly drove out of my life. I didn't hear from her for the whole week after that, and honestly, I was glad. I knew more talking would just lead to more drama. I just wanted everything to go back to normal, and I hoped I wouldn't have to see her again. It was on the weekend, when I was home alone, that something strange happened. I got home really late on a Saturday night after being out at the bars with some friends. I wasn't ready to go to bed, so I decided to have a few more drinks at home. I knew I'd regret it in the morning, but I didn't care at that moment. I had my TV next to the window in my living room, so I could easily see what's happening outside. I'm a bit paranoid, and if I'm watching TV, I want to know who's at the door before they come in. Usually, I don't pay much attention to people walking by, especially kids, but one night, I noticed a big and kind of scary-looking guy. He was dressed too warmly for the weather, and what caught my eye was that he looked over at my house. I wasn't sure if he saw me, but I saw him. After a quick look, he kept walking. I didn't think much about it and went back to watching TV for a bit. When I wanted another drink, I went to the kitchen. There's a sliding glass door facing my backyard. I usually don't pay attention to it, but when I turned off the lights, for some reason, I looked into the backyard. At first, I couldn't figure out what I saw, but I knew there was something or someone in my backyard. It was a shadowy figure. For a moment, I thought my eyes might be playing tricks on me in the dark. So, I walked closer to the window to see better. I couldn't turn on my porch light because the bulb was out. As I looked, I realized there was indeed someone in my backyard. They stood far back in the dark, and I couldn't see them clearly. But it seemed like a big man, and my mind went back to the guy I saw walking in front of my house. He must have noticed I saw him because he quickly moved towards my door. Luckily, the door was closed, but it wasn't locked. So, I had to move fast to flick the lock switch. I managed to do it before the guy reached the handle. Now, I could see the guy. He was huge and wore a black jacket. His jacket opened as he moved, and I saw a big knife tucked inside. That really scared me. The man started pulling on the door handle, even though it was locked. He kept pulling hard, and I was afraid he might break the lock and get inside. I ran into the living room closet and grabbed something to protect myself. I kept hearing him pull on the door handle, and eventually, I heard him break the lock and get the door open. He got into my house. I stood in the doorway to the closet as the man came into the house. He had already taken out his knife, but when he saw me, he stopped in his tracks because I pointed my gun straight at his head. "Get out of my house," I said, feeling scared but trying to sound tough. I had the power now, but I was really terrified. I never shot anything but a target before, and I wasn't sure if I could shoot a person. I just hoped he didn't hear the fear in my voice. He took a step forward, challenging me to shoot. In that moment, my body took over, and I pulled the trigger. The shot hit the guy in his left arm. He recoiled and yelled in pain, but he didn't stay still for long. He got up and ran out of the back door. I stood there for a while, still scared about what happened. I knew I had to call the police, but I was frozen in place. Finally, I called the police. They looked around, and I described the guy. Interestingly, he was caught lurking behind a convenience store. I went to the police station, identified him in a lineup, and the police arrested him. I mentioned my girlfriend at the beginning because she knew the guy. I thought she set this up, but it was never proven, and she was never arrested. The attacker got a short jail sentence for aggravated assault.